Joe Castiglione's retirement from Oklahoma could send shockwaves through Mississippi State because all eyes are now on Zac Selmon. The former OU deputy AD might be heading back, leaving Mississippi State with a major vacancy at the top. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Mississippi State, your daily podcast on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Jaron Spor. I'm the national college football writer at Athlon Sports. That's Landon McBride. We've got a football pack show for you today. We're going to break down some SEC recruiting numbers, as well as we're also going to give an update on Casai Barnes, who is a big-time cornerback prospect who's going to be announcing just in a couple of weeks. Mississippi State being in his final group. Can they close it out? We're going to break down the latest on his recruitment. But we got to start with the big news, and it came out yesterday. Pete Thamel broke the news, of course, does a great job for ESPN. Broke the news that Joe Castiglione, longtime athletic director, he's the longest tenured athletic director in college athletics right now. Joe Castiglione is going to retire. Now, he is staying on and hiring the next, which I believe there's actually someone else going to be doing the hiring process, but someone else will replace him and be hired. He's going to stay on and train him until the end of the academic year this year, and then he's going to kind of take on an advisor role for the next 2 years before officially stepping down. But we all knew with Mississippi State, and we've talked about it even on this podcast, that if Joe Castiglione ever stepped down, Zac Selmon's name would be in the ring for that job.
Yeah, it is, and all you have to do to know how, I guess, obvious those dots are, just Google Zac Selmon, and you have two different Sports Illustrated stories, a 24/7 story, the Oklahoman, all popping up. So, I mean, it's not hard to see why he would want to go back there. His family, I mean, legends at OU.
Yeah.
He worked there for years. So it's obvious to see why he would want to go back there. And, you know, to jump to the point, it would suck for Mississippi State. We've really talked about over the last 2 months, how he's really started to, you're seeing his vision take shape with the buildings coming in, NIL funding seeming to go up, all of those things. For him to leave now would be rough.
Yeah, for sure. And he's got this thing kind of rolling right now. And that's kind of the thing that sucks about it, because now it's at the point where, when we've talked about this, he's doing all the financial stuff, which is a big portion of it right now. Now we just have to see the wins on the field. And he obviously had a massive win on the baseball diamond by getting Brian O'Connor to come. But yeah, it's difficult because, you know, and you mentioned his ties, but, you know, he's from Norman, Oklahoma. He went to Wake Forest, but then did some schooling at the University of Oklahoma. He was at Oklahoma from 2009 to 2014, left for a little bit for 2 years, came back in 2015, and was there until he was hired away by Mississippi State in 2023. And he was serving as the deputy athletic director, so right underneath Joe Castiglione, for external engagement and advancement from 2021 to 2023. His dad is Dewey Selman, who's one of the legendary Selman brothers. The family is royalty, like you mentioned, in Oklahoma. So I don't like, unless someone has just come out and said it, I don't like to speculate and say this is his dream job, but it fits a lot of things that could be his dream job because of all the ties back to the university. And I have thought this from the start. I don't think it was a coincidence that after all that time at Oklahoma, which a ton of programs have tried to pull him away from Oklahoma, and he just never would, I don't think it was a coincidence that Mississippi State was finally the program to do it, because, one, it's an SEC program, and when he left, Oklahoma was about to transition into the SEC. Yeah. And I think, and obviously Joe Castiglione was getting older, where retirement was on the horizon. We didn't know when it would happen, but we knew it was coming. I don't think it's a coincidence that he took this job at that moment to get experience in the SEC as well, to then go back to Oklahoma whenever Joe C. hung it up.
I agree with that. And like you mentioned, you don't want to say it's his dream job, but based off his history, it's pretty safe to say if it's not, it's close to it.
Right.
So, and a program like OU, like most SEC schools, are not going to hire a first-time athletic director to run the ship. So he would have to go get that experience somewhere, and what better place if you want that job than in the same conference. So I hope he doesn't take it. I mean, for State, especially as we mentioned, the vision, we're starting to see it. And you hear it from, we see it on the recruiting field with how good the recruiting weekends are going lately and all the players they're starting to bring in with baseball, getting Brian O'Connor and the things he's saying about the commitment that he's getting. Like, you don't want all of that to go out the window, honestly. I mean, new athletic director could come in, kill it, but it's an unknown, and I don't want to have to deal with the unknown.
Yeah. And it is important to mention he signed a contract extension back in February, which lasts until January 31st, 2029. His salary is at $1.25 million annually, and it raises by $25,000 each year. The contract is renewed, and his buyout, if he were to leave for any SEC school, would be 75% of his remaining salary. So it's not like it's a cheap buyout.
But it's not a lot.
Yeah, but it's not a lot either. And especially for an athletic director. And I will say this, Oklahoma is going to get whoever Oklahoma wants, most likely. I mean, it is one of those premier programs, and they're not – if Zac Selmon's who they want, they're going to pay that buyout, and they're going to get Zac Selmon. I mean, that's just how it's going to work. Obviously, Selmon's got to want to go back there, but all point to him wanting to go back there eventually at some point. And I was kind of getting the vibe from some of the Mississippi State fans, and they kind of all knew that this was probably the likelihood once this announcement came. Now, they didn't expect it to be this early, just like I didn't expect it to be this early. I thought it'd be maybe 4 or 5 years of him at Mississippi State before something like this came out. But yeah, I mean, it would be a bummer, like you mentioned. We've talked about him raising a record amount of money, and in this new era of college athletics and how it's designed, a lot of teams are going to the front office of like an NFL style. And so the athletic director, his role has changed. Yeah. And a lot of the athletic director's role now is the financial side. And we've seen Zac Selmon hit a home run when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, he really has. And first off, Joe Castiglione is one of like the legends of athletic directors in all of sports. So it's kind of crazy that he's retiring. I mean, we all knew it was coming, but it's still wild that, you talk to anyone at any program, they have some kind of tie to them almost. So it's wild, when legends retire, it's crazy, but it's also weird that so many people know who an athletic director is. That kind of lets you know the reach he has. But yeah, I mean, Selman's killed it in the financial department. And it's also weird, when we started this podcast, we kind of talked about how we liked what Selman was doing. And we kind of caught some flack in the comments for people saying, oh, he's not doing what he needs to do. He's not doing the right thing. But now that he might go, everyone loves him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because, for those that don't know, if you subscribe to any of the On3 team sites, you get access to every team site. You just can't comment on every team site. So I had Oklahoma's pulled up and I had Mississippi State's boards pulled up. And the Oklahoma comments were funny because they were like, we don't want Zac Selmon because he doesn't have the experience. Then the Mississippi State side was, oh, gosh, he's gone. We can't lose Zac Selmon. We need Zac Selmon, all this stuff. And so it was just kind of funny getting the vibe from the fan bases. Now, I will say this, and this is something that I think is a misconception. I saw a lot of Oklahoma fans saying, man, I don't want Zac Selmon. Look how bad the football team is. Well, there's a couple things about that. Yeah. One, the king for Mississippi State, and we know this is baseball. It's not football.
Right.
While it should be football in terms of financially because that's what makes your money, it is not king here. So you need to compare what he's doing baseball-wise to what he would do football-wise at Oklahoma, and he's done great with the Brian O'Connor hire right now. Also, he took over a football program that was in shambles when he got here, and to correlate the wins-loss records to the athletic director is just dumb. It's not there. Now, if he made a bad hire, then that's fair. But let's also think about Jeff Lebby. Lebby was the most sought-after assistant in college football when he got hired at Mississippi State. So he got the most sought-after assistant to come to Mississippi State. And then we've also obviously talked about all the financial stuff. But if you go by the wins-loss, I looked this up. Joe Castiglione, before he got to Oklahoma, when he was at Missouri, they were 29-38-2 in his 6 seasons there. Terrible. He takes over at Oklahoma 3 years later, they're national champions. So it's just a dumb correlation. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be something we got to watch for a while. And unless Selman comes out and says, I don't want it, or you see him sign another extension, or, again, Oklahoma's they're going to basically be able to pick whoever they want. So it's going to, they might want someone with more experience. Kirby Hocutt, spent several years at Oklahoma as well under Joe Castiglione. Before Zac Selmon, he was under him as well, and now obviously he's the athletic director at Texas Tech. I don't know why he would leave that, because he's got all the NIL backing, which is insane out there. What they're able to do NIL wise, but that would be a name to watch too for them. And then Michael Alford, who's the athletic director at Florida State, had ties. I think he was the deputy at Oklahoma when Castiglione first got there. So there's another one. So there's some names out there that have a little more experience than Selman does.
Yeah, there's a lot of names to watch, and you kind of wonder what Selman wants to do. I mean, obviously that's what this whole thing's about, but I think it's safe to say he probably wants to go back to OU at some point. But I also think he's at a point at Mississippi State where he kind of wants to see out what he's started. But you wonder if that allure of going home for him back to Norman would be enough to pull him away right now, because you don't know when you're going to get another chance.
Well, and I don't want to say Castiglione is Nick Saban, but he's won 32 national championships in his time as athletic director. A lot of guys don't want to follow that. Like, they don't want to be the guy that follows that.
You don't want to be the guy who follows Belichick. You want to be the guy who follows the guy that followed him.
Exactly. But on the flip side, athletic director is a position that if you do really well, that person stays in that spot for a long time. Right. So who knows when this position would be open again for Selman. So that's another thing he's going to have to manage. But we'll talk about more of that. Obviously, there's going to be news on this for a while.
A lot of time.
Yeah, until Oklahoma hires someone or Selman comes out and says he's out. This is going to go on for a while. All right, we got to talk about some SEC recruiting. That's going to come up next. We found some shocking numbers when it comes to the SEC and high school recruiting. We're going to talk about that. That's coming up next.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And my personal favorite thing is you can see your seats before you buy them. You see what the view is going to be. I was looking at Gametime today, and they are the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB. And I was looking at MLB games, big baseball fan. So I was seeing, kind of what some of those seats are going to look like when I buy them, because that's important. You have to see what's on the field when you go. And so take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we got to get into some SEC recruiting news. We were just talking about Oklahoma, but we have to shout out the Locked On Sooners host, John Williams. He actually came up with this chart. His chart is how many SEC teams are ranked in the top 25 of 24/7 Sports team recruiting rankings the last 10 years. We're starting to see a little bit of a dip here. In 2017, there was 9. 2018, there was 8. Then 2019, there was 11. 9 in 2020. 9 in 2021. Missouri and Mississippi State were just outside at 26 and 27, so they were right on the verge. But then you started seeing a run. 10 and 22, 10 and 23, 13 and 24, 12 and 25. Now there's only 8 so far in the 2026. That's the fewest since 2018. And you've obviously added 2 teams since 2018. So, and 2 big time programs since 2018. So What is happening?
I think it's a little bit of everything. And we kind of saw it start, and I can't remember what year it was when they first limited the scholarships, and their whole goal was.
I think it was this offseason.
Well, that was the first. No, I mean like that first time way back where they dropped it from
Gotcha.
like 120 to 105 or something that first time.
Yeah.
And I believe that was like 2012 or something like that. And then you had the playoff NIL, and now they're dropping it again. I think we're just kind of seeing a lot of those things start to take shape, along with what amounts to 2 super conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC. You've added more teams. So some of those guys like from Texas that wanted to play in the SEC now have 2 Texas schools to choose from to play in the SEC. So I think you're kind of seeing them cannibalize each other a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you got that, and you kind of mentioned the NIL, and I've talked about this in the past. I don't think you're going to see anything like we saw Georgia in 21 and 22 in terms of they had guys on their bench that were 5-star recruits.
Right.
You're not going to see that anymore because now those 5-star recruits are like, I'm going to go, over to Indiana, or I'm going to go to, even Alabama or some of these bigger schools. And you're not going to see these just stacked teams anymore because these guys are not going to just stay there. And so now I think you're starting to see that out of the high school ranks. I think you are seeing the parity that kind of was the idea behind NIL a little bit to an extent was more teams are going to be able to compete because they're going to be able to pay. And there's always been the joke that now the SEC isn't the only conference that's able to pay players kind of thing. And so that obviously will play a factor. And I say it's a joke because all the big schools, no matter the conference, we're sliding something most likely. But yeah, I think that's what you're seeing now is just there's so much more parity now. Guys aren't like, I'm not going to go be a backup. And you're having other schools that are like, okay, that school's paying you $1 million and you might be a backup. We'll pay you 1.5 and you're definitely our starter. And then boom, they're gone. And so we're just seeing stuff that, we wouldn't have seen before. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what the cap does. And you brought up back then that you think the cap will just ultimately end up making it where players are just getting paid under the table again, whatever, so it doesn't go against the cap. Well, if that happens, I think you will start seeing the bigger time schools go back to being dominant in the recruiting ranks. And they still are for the most part. But, I mean, I think you're going to see it go back to what it used to be because although there's going to be schools like, we see what Texas Tech is doing NIL-wise, and maybe they're the ones that are going to do it. Like, who knows?
Yeah, you have that. And I think you mentioned it with the NIL, you see a lot of things like SMU was not getting big recruits. They'd hit a 4-star or 2 every class because, it's in Dallas. But now you see them pulling 4 stars from everywhere.
Right.
Mostly because of the NIL. Guy we were texting about earlier, that wide receiver who went to Sacramento State. 4-star. And Sacramento State is all in on NIL on football. So they're pulling guys from everywhere. You just didn't see that. No 4-star would have considered Sacramento State even 2 years ago. So I think that is a lot of why we're seeing the drop down because you mentioned those 4 stars that were sitting for 2 years behind the 5-star before playing. We're just going to start at a smaller school. And if they tear it up, they might transfer to an SEC school in 2 years.
And the transfer portal, has obviously made a big difference because guys like the Sacramento State guy, if he would have picked, let's say he picked like Alabama, he's most likely going to be a backup for 2 years and then might get his shot in his 3rd year. Yeah. So he's just saying, well, I'll go to Sacramento State, be a starter for 2 years, and then end up at Alabama anyways, with all this experience I now have, whereas I wouldn't have had any experience heading into that 3rd year at Alabama. And that's a good point too. And I think you're seeing some of that. The transfer portal has changed the game. And also the transfer portal has changed the game in terms of some of these big time schools are like, man, I'm only going to get 15 to 17 guys in the high school ranks because I want to get 10 to 15 in the transfer portal ranks. I think it's a mistake to rely so heavily on the transfer portal. We're seeing it from Ole Miss. I think it's terrible what they're doing because we saw it just last year. They put one of the best teams on paper, but they didn't make college football playoff with it. So they spent all that money in the transfer portal ranks, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, and that's another thing with these rankings. With how many people transferred, does where your recruiting class ranked even matter anymore? Right. Because we saw it especially with the basketball in the tournament. Was it the Sweet 16? Only like two
Yeah.
teams had a team that was majority home recruit. The rest were all
Right.
transfers. And if that's the way it's going, it doesn't really matter what your high school recruiting class looks like, because odds are maybe 5 of them stay.
Right.
So you're constantly recruiting anyway. So, I mean, you miss, you kick them out, you find a new one.
Which I think we're headed to this, but I think eventually they're going to combine the transfer portal and the recruiting class rankings to one ranking, and they should.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same. It's both recruiting. It's just one's a college kid and one's a high school kid, and so we'll see what ends up happening right there. But all right, Mississippi State's going to push for a big-time cornerback prospect. Will they be able to land him? We'll talk about that. That's coming up next. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so we got to talk about Casai Barnes, who is a 3-star prospect cornerback from North Carolina. We've talked about this before, where they have obviously Cameron Brown and Terrell Johnson committed. They would like to add one more in the high school ranks, and then obviously some transfer portal stuff at the end of the year. Casai Barnes has kind of been one of the ones they've circled. His commitment date is July 26th. There are 6 finalists that include Mississippi State, Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Rutgers. From what I've read and what I've looked up, it looks like Casai Barnes is leading to the Carolinas, either staying at home in North Carolina or going to South Carolina. But on threes, predictor, or I guess it's now Rivals predictor. I wonder if they call it something else now. Rutgers is actually the favorite, just slightly over South Carolina. Ironically, North Carolina is below 1% and even below Mississippi State. So it looks like if it's one of the Carolinas, according to that, it'll probably be South Carolina. But that's before a bunch of predictions usually come in the weeks leading up to it. So it looks like they're probably going to have to be sorting out for who the next one is. They are in the final 6, but it doesn't sound like they're even really in the top 3. So I wouldn't hold our breath for this one.
I wouldn't either. And 24/7 has the 2 votes are both for South Carolina. He's a big guy, 6'3", 190. I mean, that's a long corner. I will say half of his tape is him as a receiver, and I kind of like his receiver tape better than him as a corner. Yeah. So, but hey, he's got the raw tools. You'd love to have him come in, but it really doesn't seem like we're even in the mix at all. I mean, we're technically in the mix. It's not over till it's over. But when everyone is projecting one of 2 outcomes, it's usually one of those 2 outcomes. Right. At the end, you rarely see a full surprise. But, yeah, it looks like they're going to have to go back to the drawing board for whoever the next corner could be. They need to add another corner in this class, I think. I mean, they obviously do too, since they're still looking. But, hopefully maybe Mir keep pushing. Got a couple weeks to try to sway him a little bit. But if not, get back out there.
Yeah, and the weird thing about Casai Barnes is he's a 3-star on 24/7 Sports. He's not rated on any other site. He's the number 63 ranked cornerback. He's not ranked nationally at all. But and I talk about this all the time, look at the offers. Look at his offer list. Rutgers, South Carolina, Kentucky, Miami, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Louisville, Michigan State, Cincinnati. That's all the Power 4 programs, but then he still has Liberty, Appalachian State, James Madison, some big time Group of 5 programs as well. Yeah. So his offer list does not match up with his rating whatsoever.
Not at all. We see that a lot, especially at this point in recruiting, because the teams are a little bit more on these players than the recruiting sites are. Right. And as the recruiting sites find out about all the offers, that's when they start to dig in, and all of a sudden the unranked guy is a strong 4-star. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on that 3 to 4-star kind of gap before is all said and done. I don't know. I don't think he's come to Starkville, but
right. Well, that tells me a couple things about him. He's probably he definitely is an under the radar prospect that teams know about, but the recruiting sites don't know, and they might not know because he doesn't go to camps much. I don't know if he does. I didn't look and see if he goes to camps, so that could be a reason. Yeah. Another thing tells me he's probably a raw prospect. With him, and like you mentioned, his tape has a lot of wide receiver stuff on it. It's possible that with the school he plays at, he was more of a wide receiver, but then they started realizing, you actually probably would be better getting recruited wise as a corner, and so he's more raw as a corner. But these teams are seeing that freak athleticism and the ability, that's the potential that's there. So you never know, that it could be something like that for him.
Yeah, it definitely could be, and something could be you don't know where to play him, because even his corner tape, he kind of plays a little bit more like a box safety that can cover. So I mean, he's a weird prospect. Type of guy you want to get in the building, though, because he clearly has the athleticism to do multiple things, and you find out what's best for him and you put him there.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see what ends up happening with that one. We're still a little less than 3 weeks away, so we got some time, but probably not going Mississippi State's way on that one. But
yeah, probably.
All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Jaron. Check out my work over on Athlon Sports. That's Landon. Follow us, Locked On Mississippi State. We're on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Post daily videos Monday through Friday, so check those out. We also post a question every single time on YouTube. We love your interaction on that. We got some great interaction on this one. Our poll or our post we posted about Zac Selmon had some great interaction on that as well yesterday. But on YouTube, hit that like, subscribe, ring the bell, get notified anytime we post any kind of content, and tell your friends about us. We made the goal of getting 1,000 subscribers by early in the football season. Since then, we are moving up the boards even more. I think yesterday I said we were at like 762 or something like that.
562.
That's what I meant, 562. I was saying 7 because we're at 576 now. So we're still moving up the board. So we love the feedback on that, and we love you guys, trusting us with the Mississippi State content. So tell your friends. But until next time, Hail State.
Hail State.